When you think of MMA's most important fighters, Stephan Bonnar will surely make the shortlist. His battle with Forrest Griffin in 2005 is cited as the match that saved the UFC from bankruptcy, and in turn sparked MMA's boom period of the mid-2000s. We celebrate Bonnar's MMA career, a roller coaster ride from the jungles of Brazil to the sport's biggest stage. Welcome to the INC, and this is the story of the American Psycho, Stephan Bonnar. The Stephan Bonnar story began in an unlikely surrounding of Hammond, Indiana. Bonnar set his career out from an early stage. The fighter first began training wrestling at the age of 10 before adding boxing, Muay Thai, and a jiu-jitsu purple belt under Carlson Gracie to his repertoire. While studying for a sports science degree with Purdue University, Bonnar began competing in his first combat events, winning a regional Golden Gloves contest before winning his debut in a one-night tournament against future UFC fighter Brian Ebersole. Not that Bonnar had much time to enjoy the victory.
When I went to stand up again, oh my God, where I need him, the quad muscle there, the vastus medialis, oh, it hurt so bad. It was so tender, like it hurt. And then they come down and they're like, oh yeah, the guy on the other side of the bracket pulled out. We're going to have your finals match next. And I'm like, what? I'm like, what? That's like, how the hell am I going to fight with this? Like, I couldn't even walk or put weight on it.
Bonnar's early career took place almost entirely in Indiana, competing in sporadic regional shows, winning all but one of his fights in the first round, as well as a decision over future UFC fighter Terry Martin. It was during this time that Bonnar was offered the chance to compete for the newly formed Jungle Fight promotion in Brazil, suffering his first career loss to a then unknown Lyoto Machida in 2003. Despite finding success at the lower level, Bonnar saw MMA as little more than a pastime, a means of earning extra income around his day job as a fitness coach. That was until a decision 1,700 miles away transformed his career. In January 2001, Zuffa LLC purchased the UFC from Semaphore Entertainment. Despite improved advertising and attempts to garner favor with the state athletic commissions, the promotion failed to gain a foothold with casual fans, and by 2004 had amassed losses of $34 million. In a final attempt to garner mainstream exposure, the company announced The Ultimate Fighter, a reality TV series pitting regional fighters against one another for a six-figure contract with the UFC. Bonnar was chosen as one of the 16 men for the inaugural cast, which included feature stars Diego Sanchez, Josh Koscheck, and Kenny Florian. As one of the few natural light heavyweights on the roster, Bonnar was earmarked as one of the early favorites, beating Bobby Southworth by split decision before a first-round submission over Mike Swick. This led Bonnar to the show's finale and a match with fan favorite Forrest Griffin. What followed, well, simply would be regarded as one of the most pivotal moments in the sport's history. Despite both men being noted for their grappling, Bonnar and Griffin chose to stand and trade for the entirety of the bout, engaging in an all-action war described by Joe Rogan as the Hagler Hearns of MMA, all while TV numbers increased as word of mouth spread over the conflict. Bonnar and Griffin continued their assault for the remainder of the fight, with the Georgia native claiming the judge's nod by unanimous decision. Bonnar's heroics had seemingly been in vain. That was until UFC President Dana White decided to call an audible.
Frank, Lorenzo, and I have gotten together and we've decided there is no loser in this fight, and we're going to offer Stephan Bonnar a six-figure contract with the UFC.
Griffin vs. Bonnar is regarded as one of the most important fights in UFC history, with Dana White citing the bout as the reason for the sport's boom in popularity in the mid-2000s. The Ultimate Fighter was renewed for a second season in the hours after, while the following UFC 52 became the most watched pay-per-view in company history at the time. Griffin vs. Bonnar continues to be acknowledged as one of the sport's greatest matches, and in 2013 became the first match inducted into the fight wing of the UFC Hall of Fame. Due to his newfound popularity, Bonnar's early tenure was spent as a fixture of the UFC's fight nights, claiming wins over Sam Hoger, James Irvin, and Keith the Meat of Dean Jardine, before suffering his first company loss to future UFC champion Rashad Evans. In 2006, Bonnar and Griffin locked horns again in the co-main of UFC 62, but those expecting another epic brawl were left disappointed, as an improved Griffin neutralized his opponent on his way to a unanimous decision. Bonnar's disappointment was amplified weeks later when he tested positive for the anabolic steroid boldenone and was forced to serve a 9-month suspension. If the first Griffin fight got Bonnar into the UFC, the second confirmed his place in its hierarchy, a fan favorite capable of exciting fights, but a sizable step below the sport's elites. At UFC 94, Bonnar was paired against future legend Jon Jones, being dominated by the youngster on his way to a unanimous decision, before an upset loss to UFC Hall of Famer Mark Coleman. Bonnar regained some of his old magic in a pair of wars with Krzysztof Soszynski, the fights descending into wild brawls reminiscent of his epic battle with Griffin. While Bonnar would lose the first fight due to a doctor stoppage, the bout's controversial end led to a rematch at UFC 116, with Bonnar claiming Fight of the Night honors in what was then the most watched event in company history. During this time, Bonnar began looking at ventures outside the cage, most notably in his role as a commentator for WEC, providing the soundtrack for one of the greatest moments in company history.
And Stephan, I cannot think of a better way to bring down the curtain.
Oh my goodness! Did you see that? He ran off the wall like a ninja!
By the time Bonnar entered his 30s, he was firmly cemented in the light heavyweight midcard. While decision wins over Kyle Kingsbury and Igor Pokrajac were impressive, they did little to convince fans the fighter was on the verge of a run at the belt. Bonnar's frustration at a lack of big-name opponents led him to briefly announce his retirement and turn his attention to coaching, until a twist of fate gave the veteran one last pay-per-view showcase. UFC 153 was set to be headlined by Jose Aldo's featherweight title match with Eric Cook, only for Aldo to withdraw from the bout after injuring his foot in a motorbike accident. With the UFC desperate for a main event, Bonnar agreed to step in as a short-notice replacement, taking on middleweight champion Anderson Silva in one of the Spider's rare ventures to 205. Bonnar did little to dispel his status as a plus 800 underdog, as Silva toyed with his opponent for the majority of the fight before finishing with knees late in the first round, the final win of the Spider's majestic 17-fight winning streak. Shortly after the fight, Bonnar tested positive for the anabolic steroid drostanolone, and at 35 and facing a lengthy suspension, Bonnar chose to make his semi-retirement a permanent one, for at least 12 months. In August 2014, Bonnar was coaxed back into action by Bellator to take on fellow legend Tito Ortiz, the first of many Dad's Army matches the company became synonymous with during this era. Apathy during the fight's initial announcement soon gave way to bemusement as Bonnar began a publicity drive complete with unmaskings, pre-fight brawls, and trash talk straight out of the WWE playbook.
All I gotta say to you is, poor Jenna. I don't know how she put up with you all those years.
Given the fight's build, the match proved underwhelming. Ortiz claiming a split decision in a fight that did more harm than good for Bellator's long-term credibility. Despite having multiple fights left on his contract, Bonnar decided to cut his losses early, retiring for a third and final time a few months later. Bonnar's pro wrestling exploits in the Ortiz build led him to pursue ventures in the sport for real, working for a number of indie promotions before a brief run with Impact Wrestling in 2017. Behind the scenes, dark clouds began to circle the Hall of Famer. During this time, Bonnar became embroiled in a series of unsettling scandals. In 2018, the fighter was arrested after being found drunk at the wheel of a crashed car, with witnesses claiming Bonnar had to be tied to his steering wheel when he attempted to escape the scene of the accident. Bonnar was later alleged to have developed an addiction to painkillers, stemming from chronic arthritis and back issues relating to his fighting and wrestling career. This led to a well-publicized outburst in 2021, when Bonnar was kicked out of a hospital for allegedly attacking a doctor when they refused to prioritize his treatment.
Dude, we can see who you are. Look at this
joke. I'm a doctor. I get all the ladies. Hey, what was my treatment? What did you recommend for me, face?
Bonnar's demons were documented with alarming regularity, being kicked out of his local gym for failing to follow COVID mandates, and later joining the cult of Joshua Fabia during the Guru's time working with Diego Sanchez. Many fans fear the worst for Bonnar's short-term safety, and those fears were realized on December 22nd, when Bonnar passed away from heart complications at the age of 45, leaving behind his wife and his son Griffin, named after his friend and long-term UFC rival. Stephan Bonnar carries an unusual place in MMA folklore. While lacking the success of the sport's other legends, the impact of the Griffin fight makes him worthy of his icon status, along with being a beloved fan favorite who could always be relied on for exciting matches. Bonnar remains a primary reason for MMA being where it is today, and that's a legacy fans, old and new, will never forget.
I've spilled pints and pints of blood for you guys over the years, and you know what? It's thoroughly been my pleasure.
This is the INC. Please like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss a video.